What if a quiet librarian was forced to marry a ruthless billionaire just to save her dying father, only to discover that love might be the most dangerous deal of all? Callie Whitmore never imagined she'd trade her last name for a boardroom war, or that beneath Damian Lancaster's cold exterior lay secrets that could destroy or save them both. Intrigue, betrayal, and a kiss that wasn't supposed to mean anything until it did. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more breathtaking love stories that keep your heart racing till the very last word. The manila envelope thudded against the polished oak desk of Whitlow Public Library with a dull finality, its arrival breaking the quiet rhythm of Callie Whitmore's afternoon. "Sign here, please," the courier muttered, barely glancing at her before sliding the clipboard across the desk. Callie's hand hovered for a beat, trembling slightly before she forced it to steady. 3 bank notices, 2 hospital invoices, and now this. She scribbled her name and took the envelope, her stomach coiling with unease. The courier left without ceremony, and she stared at the envelope for a long moment before finally tearing it open. "Miss Callista Whitmore," the letter began in crisp serif font. "We regret to inform you of the passing of Mr. Victor Hale, your maternal grandfather." Her breath caught in her throat. Grandfather? Her mother had never spoken of her father. The few times Callie had dared to ask, the subject was shut down with a firm, "He made his choice." That choice, apparently, hadn't precluded naming her the beneficiary of his estate. The further she read, the more surreal it became. Victor Hale had been a co-founder of Lancaster Tech, one of the fastest-growing biotech firms on the East Coast, and Callie, according to the will, now owned 18% of it. She gasped out loud, earning a sharp glance from Mrs. Doherty, the head librarian, who raised a graying brow from behind the returns counter. "Sorry," Callie whispered, tucking the letter into her canvas tote bag as if hiding it would make it less real. She pushed through the rest of her shift in a daze, checking out fantasy books for wide-eyed kids while her own reality morphed into something stranger than any dragon-ridden tale. When she finally trudged up the path to the little rented house she and her father shared, she found comfort in the familiar creak of the porch step and the low hum of medical equipment behind the door. "Hey, sweetheart," her father called weakly from his hospital bed in the living room, his smile as warm as ever despite the wires and machines framing him like a cage. "Hey, Dad," she replied, forcing a brightness into her voice she didn't feel. She couldn't bring herself to tell him yet. Not about the money, not about the shares, not about Victor Hale. She prepared his medication, helped him with dinner, read from his favorite novel until he drifted off. But even as she went through the motions, the letter burned in her bag like it had a pulse of its own. At midnight, she sat at their kitchen table, the same table her mother had once used to teach her to read. The memories came in flashes. Her mother's hands on her small fingers, guiding them across the pages of worn fairy tale books. Her throat tightened. That was 5 years ago. Cancer had taken her swiftly, leaving behind bills and silence. Callie stared at the number listed at the bottom of the letter. Her fingers hovered, then tapped. "Miss Whitmore?" a man's voice answered, crisp and composed. "Jonathan Leeds, attorney for the Hale estate." "Yes," Callie said. I got the letter. Is this real?" "It is. Your grandfather kept tabs on your life from afar. He expressed regret about the estrangement with your mother. He was proud of you." "Then why didn't he ever reach out?" There was a pause. Victor Hale was many things. Warm was not one of them. Callie said nothing. "Miss Whitmore," Leeds continued, "you now hold a critical stake in Lancaster Tech. There's a board vote next week. A project called Aeon hangs in the balance. Your shares will decide it. I can't just leave. My father needs care. The estate will fund a full-time home nurse. You'll be flown to Boston, placed in temporary housing, and briefed before the meeting." Callie looked down at her father's sleeping face, then back at the letter. 18% of a tech giant. Millions of dollars. A vote that could change lives. And hers had already changed in the space of a single envelope. The lobby of Lancaster Tech's headquarters gleamed like a cathedral built to worship steel and innovation. Callie Whitmore stood inside its towering glass atrium, a solitary figure in a navy wool coat and department store pumps that pinched her toes. Everything smelled like money, polished marble, high-grade coffee, and the faint ozone tinge of cutting-edge tech. She clutched her visitor badge like a lifeline, trailing a stone-faced assistant toward the elevators. The boardroom was on the 62nd floor. When the doors opened, Callie stepped into a space that felt more like a set from a corporate thriller than real life. Long glass walls, minimalist furniture, and a table large enough to land a helicopter. 12 board members turned to look at her. 11 wore suits in varying shades of severity. One woman in a cobalt blazer tapped her pen against a tablet without smiling. And at the head of the table sat a man she instantly knew was Damien Lancaster. He didn't rise. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply studied her with eyes the color of flint, his jaw cut from ambition and discipline. He looked younger than she expected, early 30s maybe, but carried himself like a man who had outpaced his years by sheer force of will. "Miss Whitmore," he said at last, voice deep and smooth like poured bourbon. "Thank you for making the trip. We were just discussing Project Aeon. Your shares represent the swing vote." Callie blinked. I only just found out I even had shares." A murmur passed down the table like a current. Damien gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Then I suggest you catch up quickly." As she sat, an older man across the table leaned forward. "I'm Elias Marlowe," he said, his tone cordial with a cutting undertone. "Victor Hale's former partner. He and I had different ideas about legacy." Callie managed a nod. Elias turned back to the room. "Aeon, for all its promise, is still in early development. We're talking about embedding neural interfaces directly into the human brain." Victor himself expressed concerns before his passing. "That's not accurate," Damien interjected, voice tight. Victor supported Aeon. It was his vision. "And your windfall," Elias added smoothly, gesturing toward Callie. Callie's stomach twisted. She felt more like a pawn than ever. Damien stood. "Miss Whitmore, may I speak with you privately?" She nodded, numb, and followed him out into a sleek hallway lined with abstract art. His office was colder in tone. Black furniture, high windows, a single bonsai tree that looked almost like a rebellion. He turned to her, arms crossed. "I'll be direct. I need your vote. And I need to understand what I'm voting on." "You'll be briefed," she shook her head. "I want everything. Not summaries, not spin. The truth." Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise? Respect? It vanished. Aeon is a neural interface that can reroute damaged pathways, restore motor function. Your father could walk again. Callie froze. "How do you know about my father?" "I do my research. You're using him to manipulate me." "I'm offering you options," he countered. "Real ones. But time is short. The vote's in 48 hours, and the board favors tradition, stability, a CEO who's grounded." Callie raised an eyebrow. So marry me." She stared. "It would be a business arrangement. 1 year. In exchange, I get voting control over your shares. You get financial security, and your father receives full medical support, world-class treatment." "That's insane." "It's strategic, it's transactional, it's practical." Callie paced, heat rising in her chest. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to. You're Victor Hale's heir. You're the missing piece. Marry me, and you'll never have to worry about bills or medical debt again." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw not just the CEO, but the man behind the armor, cold, calculated, but desperate for something he wouldn't name. Callie exhaled. "You want my answer?" He nodded once. "Draw up the contract." The wedding was over in 20 minutes. Callie Whitmore became Mrs. Lancaster beneath the arch of Damien's private rooftop garden overlooking the Boston skyline, her signature inked onto a marriage license minutes after she signed her voting proxy. A handful of hand-picked witnesses, board members, a company lawyer, and a strategically positioned photographer, watched her smile on cue beside a man she barely knew. The dress was couture, the ring glittered like betrayal, and nothing about it felt real. Their first week as husband and wife was a performance. Damien returned to the office each morning before sunrise, his suits sharp and his words minimal. Callie drifted through the mansion like a guest wearing a name tag that didn't belong to her. The staff, though polite, seemed unsure of how long to expect her around. Their dinners were scripted, their photo ops staged, but something unscripted happened during their third event together. It was a gala for the Aeon Foundation, and Callie had grown used to wearing borrowed elegance and walking 3 steps behind Damien. The ballroom was a palace of crystal chandeliers and whispered power. Damien stood with investors discussing brain mapping like it was a stock portfolio when a silver-haired man approached. "Mrs. Lancaster," he said with polite venom. "A pleasure." Callie turned. "Mr. Marlowe." Elias's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Has the company explained everything to you yet, or are you just playing the dutiful wife?" "I'm exactly as involved as I choose to be." "Then let me offer you something your husband won't," he said, lowering his voice. "The truth about Aeon, about your grandfather, about what happened to Damien's parents." Her breath caught. "What does that mean?" "Ask him who the first test subjects were." She didn't get the chance. Damien appeared at her side, his hand firm on her back. "Mr. Marlowe, always lurking. Just offering your wife a friendly welcome. She seems curious. That's dangerous in your world, isn't it?" Damien's jaw flexed. "We'll see ourselves out." Back in the car, Callie stared out the window, the lights of Boston streaking past. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "Were your parents test subjects?" There was a long silence. Damien didn't answer until they were parked outside the mansion. "They were," he said. "Victor and I believed in the early version of Aeon. After the car accident, I thought," he exhaled, looking suddenly older, "I thought it could save them. But it didn't. No, it failed. And my grandfather? He warned me to slow down. I didn't listen." Callie stared at him. "You built this company on a grave. I built it to make sure no one else ended up buried under silence and failure." The next morning, she wandered into the mansion's library, needing air, needing space, needing proof that she hadn't sold her soul for a corporate fairy tale. The room was massive, lined with first editions and scientific journals. On the upper level, tucked into a quiet corner, she found a book titled Neural Interface Paradigms. Inside the front cover was a note in faded ink. "To D. Push farther than I ever could. VH." Her grandfather, her husband, a project that had consumed them both. Later that week, while reviewing charity proposals in Damien's home office, she stumbled across a file marked Aeon, Original Trials. Her fingers hovered, then opened it. Notes, data, diagrams. One line stood out in Victor Hale's neat handwriting. "Neural degradation unacceptable at current thresholds." Her stomach twisted. She barely had time to close the file before Damien's assistant entered. "You're not supposed to be in here." "I'm his wife." The man's expression stayed neutral. "I'll inform Mr. Lancaster you were reviewing foundation materials." She said nothing. But as she walked out, her heart thudded with more than nerves. She was no longer just the swing vote. She was standing on a fault line, and something was beginning to crack. The call came just after midnight. Callie bolted upright in bed, heart thudding as she grabbed her phone and saw the hospital's name flash across the screen. "Dr. Langford's voice was tight with urgency. "Mrs. Lancaster, your father has been removed from the neurology wing. We believe the transfer authorization was forged." "What?" "He left with a man identifying himself as an associate. We have it on video." Elias Marlowe. The room spun. Callie was already throwing on a coat when she ran straight into Damien in the hallway. He'd been working late again, dressed in black slacks and a fitted sweater. Sleeves pushed up, phone pressed to his ear. "Where are you going?" "My father. He's gone. Marlowe took him. I have to find him." "I know," Damien said quietly, lowering the phone. "We've traced their signal. They're at an old research site near Concord, one of the original Lancaster tech facilities. Security's on standby. I'll take you." They drove through the night in silence, tension coiling between them like a storm waiting to break. Damien's jaw was clenched, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Marlowe's trying to prove Aeon is dangerous by sabotaging it himself," he finally said. "He wants to discredit me, ruin the project, and he's using your father to do it." Callie stared out the window, rage boiling beneath her ribs. "He's going to hurt him just to make a point?" "Your father's treatment was preparing him for Aeon. If Marlowe disrupts that protocol now, it could trigger irreversible neural stress. He's gambling with a human life just to destroy mine." They reached the facility at dawn. It loomed like a ghost from another time, concrete, overgrown, forgotten. Damien cut the lights and parked 100 yards away. "Stay here," he ordered. "No." "Callie, this is dangerous. He's my father. If you go in without me, I'll follow anyway." Damien looked at her, something like reluctant admiration flickering in his eyes. "Then stay behind me, and when I say run, you run." They moved through the building silently, flashlights casting long shadows across old lab equipment and broken floor tiles. Through a cracked door, they spotted him. George Whitmore, strapped to a medical bed, wires snaking into his arms, monitors beeping out a discordant rhythm. Elias stood over him, hands moving across a control panel, adjusting electrical impulses with clinical precision. "You're deliberately stressing his system," Damien whispered. "He's replicating the early failures." Callie stepped forward before Damien could stop her. "Dad?" George's eyes fluttered. "Callie?" Elias turned, surprised for only a moment. "Ah, the prodigal daughter, and the prodigal CEO." "This is over," Damien said, voice like steel. "Security is on the way." "They won't make it in time," Elias replied, drawing a gun from beneath his coat. "Inside. Both of you." Callie rushed to her father's side as Damien stepped in front of them both. "His neural readings are destabilizing," Callie said. "He needs stabilization now." "Only after I get what I came for," Elias said. "I want an emergency board meeting called. I want you to denounce Aeon. Withdraw your support on the record." "No," Damien said. "Then your father dies," Elias snapped. "Like your parents did. Like everyone who believed in this broken dream of yours." "You killed them, didn't you?" Damien asked softly. "You sabotaged the prototype. You knew they'd volunteer." Elias smiled coldly. "They were a necessary sacrifice, just like George will be." Callie's hands flew across the medical console, trying to override the stimulation sequence. Elias aimed the gun at her. "Step back." She didn't, and that's when Damien moved. Fast, a blur of fury and instinct. He tackled Elias as the gun discharged, the bullet slicing across Damien's side. Callie screamed, diving to disconnect her father from the system. Alarms blared. Security burst through the doors seconds later. Elias was wrestled to the ground, the gun kicked away. Damien slumped against the wall, blood staining his shirt. Callie crawled to him, cradling his head. "You saved him." His eyes found hers, dark with pain. "Couldn't let him take anything else from me." And then, as sirens wailed and her father's breathing steadied, Callie realized she hadn't just saved her father. She was about to lose the man who'd become her husband in name, and maybe something far more real. 6 months later, autumn had painted the trees of Whitlow in amber and gold. The small cottage Callie rented sat on the edge of a quiet road, wrapped in the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. On the porch, she watched her father make his slow way down the ramp with the walker. He was steady now. Stronger. Every step was a miracle. 3 laps today, George beamed, breathless but proud. Not bad for a guy who couldn't wiggle a toe a year ago. Not bad at all, Callie said, her smile gentle. But it didn't quite reach her eyes. Project Aeon had launched globally 2 months earlier. It had made headlines, won awards, and drawn the world's attention. Her father had been one of the first civilian recipients of the complete neural interface. The therapy that had nearly killed him, under Marlowe's manipulation, was now giving him back his life. Still, she hadn't spoken to Damien since she left California. After his surgery and recovery, Damien had returned to Lancaster Tech with renewed fire, but colder eyes. The man who had whispered, "Stay with me," in an ambulance, had disappeared behind boardroom doors and the armor of ambition. She remembered the night she left. He'd stood in the hallway of the mansion, backlit by moonlight and shadows. "You should go," he'd said. "I can't promise it won't happen again, that someone won't try to use you to get to me." "So you're protecting me by pushing me away?" "Yes." And she'd gone, not because she stopped loving him, but because he wasn't ready to let himself be loved. A soft buzz interrupted her thoughts. Her phone lit up with a news alert. Lancaster Tech CEO to receive Global Humanitarian Award for Neural Advancement. The ceremony would be held in New York tomorrow night. Her thumb hovered over the screen, then tapped to save the date. She didn't plan to go. And yet, 24 hours later, she stood in the back of the Hyatt ballroom, her coat still buttoned, watching Damien take the stage. He looked thinner, the hard angles of his face sharper. His tuxedo was immaculate, but his eyes carried the weight of something unsaid. Project Aeon, he began, was never just about technology. It was about possibility, reconnection, the belief that what is broken can be restored. Callie gripped the back of a chair as he continued, his voice steady but different, warmer, more human. "This award belongs to 2 people, Damien said. First, to Victor Hale, whose brilliance started it all." He paused, and second to Callista Whitmore Lancaster. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Callie froze. Most of you know her as my wife. What you don't know is that without her strength, her integrity, and her unshakable compassion, Aeon would not have survived, and neither would I. The room fell silent. She taught me that control is not power, that love cannot be negotiated or managed, it must be surrendered to, and I didn't. I failed her, and it is my deepest regret. He looked out over the audience, and somehow, despite the lights, his eyes found hers. She didn't remember walking down the aisle toward him, but suddenly she was there, just as he stepped off the stage. They met in the space between rows of strangers and applause. "Your speech," she said softly. "It was brave. I didn't know you were here. I didn't plan to be. Are you here for us?" "I don't know," she admitted. "You built a wall I couldn't climb. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself." He exhaled. "I don't know how to do this, Callie." "Neither do I," she whispered, "but I'd rather figure it out with you than succeed alone." He took her hand, tentative, almost reverent. "I love you." The words cracked something open. "I never stopped," she said, "even when you did." Their kiss, when it came, was quiet. No press, no cameras, just them. 2 months later, they renewed their vows, not for the company, not for appearances, but for each other. This time, when she said "I do," it wasn't a contract, it was a promise. Life lesson from a signature of secrets. Sometimes the most unexpected journeys begin with a single envelope, and a choice born from desperation. Callie's story reminds us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet voice saying, "I'll do whatever it takes for the ones I love." Through heartbreak, manipulation, and impossible decisions, she discovered something powerful. Love isn't about control, image, or perfection. It's about trust, vulnerability, and the willingness to fight for connection, even when everything else falls apart. Damien, a man wrapped in cold precision and guilt, had to lose control to find healing. His path reveals that redemption doesn't come from achievement or awards, it comes from admitting your mistakes, choosing love over pride, and allowing others to truly see you. No legacy, no invention, no amount of power can replace genuine human connection. The most valuable lesson in this story is that healing, whether emotional, physical, or relational, requires honesty, forgiveness, and surrender. Not just to each other, but to the truth that sometimes we're strongest when we let someone in. So wherever you're watching from, whether it's a small town like Whitlow or a bustling city like Boston, I want to know, what would you be willing to risk for love, for truth, for someone you care about? Drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next unforgettable love story. See you in the next chapter.